Hello and welcome back to the Baseball Card Collector. Today's video I will be releasing my all-time Cincinnati Red baseball team. I have chosen the players from current back to the 70s, and I will display the winning baseball player at each position on our cool little Wrigley Field replica baseball field. It's the only backdrop I have, so the all-time Reds team will be backed by the Chicago Cubs center field scoreboard there. So let's get started. Let's start in the outfield. I chose three outfielders. The first was an easy decision, Frank Robinson. I do not have any retro Frank Robinson, but if you know anything about him, the guy was a hitter. He won an MVP in the NL and the AL. He's in the 500 home run club. He's a Hall of Famer. Might even say the all-time Cincinnati Red, but he did bounce around with a few teams. So my left fielder, Frank Robinson. Moving into center field, a little more recent of a player. He did not win an MVP. He is not in the Hall of Fame, but when I first started collecting cards, this guy was amazing. Just look at the guy trotting across the field here, Eric Davis. The guy had power, he had speed, he was a great center fielder. And when I first started up, he was the Mr. Red in my book. But so in the late 80s, early 90s, he stuck around for that 1990s World Series team. So my outfielder in center field for the Cincinnati Reds, Eric Davis. In the third outfield position, this outfielder also won an MVP award. He had 52 home runs, a million RBIs in one of his seasons. He wasn't a Red all that long, but he is a big hitter, an MVP winner, and here is 1980 Topps George Foster. If I flip around his card, 10 years, almost 10 years as a Red, but I think he's part of this big red machine outfield, hitting in the middle of the order. Outfielder George Foster. Put him in right field. Let's go into the infield. We're going to start at first base. This actually is the only infielder on my Reds team that did not win an MVP. All he had to do was settle for a Hall of Fame career. I chose an 86 Donruss, first baseman Tony Perez. Over 1,600 RBIs. Again, that big red machine. It's just he was there, and he was there for all of it. And he did jump teams there at the end of his career like many players do. But for first base, I had it between Tony Perez and current first baseman Joey Votto, but I gave the nod to the Hall of Famer. Joey Votto maybe, but for now, Tony Perez is the first baseman. Moving over to second base, this guy, also that big red machine team from the 70s, he was a back-to-back MVP. He had the most home runs for a second baseman in a career, Joe Morgan. And here he is in his red uniform. I was actually lucky enough to get him to sign TTM several years ago, but I had him sign a Giants card. I really didn't think that through, but this guy was a back-to-back MVP, Hall of Famer. So the infield so far, one Hall of Famer at first, one Hall of Famer at second, back-to-back MVP player Joe Morgan at second base. My shortstop, and I might be slightly in favor of a current for me growing up, my Cincinnati Red Shortstop, and again, based on my time of life, Dave Concepcion would be maybe a choice for some. He played, again, those big red machine years, all of those games played, but for me, my shortstop I chose the shiniest Barry Larkin card I could find. Barry Larkin, my shortstop, he was a one-time MVP. He is also in the Hall of Fame. and he was just always there when I was growing up, when I was playing. I even had a pair of those red and white Nikes back in the day. My shortstop, Barry Larkin. Rounding out the Hall of Fame, should be Hall of Fame, MVP, third baseman. Love him, like him, hate him, think what you want, but the guy has numbers for days. Pete Rose, all-time hits leader. He also has an MVP. He made some choices afterwards that aren't so great, but man, the playing career, easy choice. Pete Rose, my Reds all-time third base. Moving on in, and I'm going to put this next player as my captain of the all-time Cincinnati Red team, and no doubt Hall of Fame, Gold Glove, MVP, World Series, all of the things, anything you could think of. You really can't think of the Cincinnati Reds without this man, Johnny Bench. Catcher, Johnny Bench. Just, I would say, the rock of that 70s big red machine, just a hitter defensively all around, and you can back that up with, like I said, Hall of Fame, All-Star, MVP, all of the awards. You can't really go wrong. Johnny Bench, easily the catcher of the Cincinnati Reds all-time team. I chose 2 starting pitchers and 1 relief pitcher, and I chose my starting pitcher, Tom Seaver. And most of his career, I feel like he could be a Met. I chose him mostly because of this 78 team. I feel like he was right there at the Big Red Machine time. But you can see, look at those Mets years. Tom Seaver, though, one of the greatest pitchers ever, just passed away not too long ago. Just like him in that Reds uniform, just makes me feel like, hey, look at that look he's looking at us, put me on this team. It's hard to argue with Tom Seaver. And like the Barry Larkin, if you're born in the late 70s, early 80s, and you were watching baseball in the early 90s, the Reds had a really good run of playoff teams. And when I was watching TV, when I was watching the playoffs in those early 90s and in that World Series team, I thought this guy was a stud. Jose Rio. Chose this 94 Donruss. I like those kind of sleeveless jerseys with the long sleeves sticking out of there, but he just was the big game pitcher. I feel like he was on there when it was like the game that they needed the most. They sent out Jose Rio, and the guy was just a beast. And I thought, man, that guy, and he's not a Hall of Famer, probably the only one on this list, but he just was the guy I watched growing up early on in life. I thought, man, that guy was a big game pitcher, and I just always had a small liking for Jose Rio. So he's pitcher number 2. My relief pitcher, and I could have gone with a couple players with tons of saves. I basically picked the guy like Jose Rio. When I think of the Reds, I think about a guy that threw it over 100 miles an hour, and he didn't really know where it was going. And this picture on this 91 score is a great photo of just what he kind of looked like, I'd assume, as a batter. Rob Dibble. The guy threw gas. He had like the highest strikeouts per 9 innings for the longest time. Maybe he still does, but I love these K-Men cards, 91 score. But I'm calling Rob Dibble my reliever on my all-time Reds team. Put him back here. And for the manager, close it out. I have an easy choice here, I feel. Leading this all-time Reds team, skipper from those big red machines, keeping it all together, keeping it running. Easy call, Reds manager Sparky Anderson. Here as a player, I don't recognize him as that look when I think of him here. Even then, as a Tiger manager when I was growing up early on, he even looks old in 1978. I mean, how old was he when I was watching him when he was coaching, managing Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker in the 90s? So anyway, my manager for the Reds team, Sparky Anderson. All right, guys, that'll do it for my all-time Cincinnati Reds team. Take a look. Do you agree with a position? Do you disagree with a position? Do you have a person you would put in instead of or in place of? They're lucky to be at the friendly confines there, you can see. But if you like this video, if you have suggestions for another team you would like to see, leave it in the comments, and we will see you next time.